You know that moment when your husband calmly informs you his mistress is moving in tomorrow, and your first thought isn't, "Oh my God, my life is over," but finally, someone else to argue about the thermostat with? That was my Wednesday, November 6th, a perfectly unremarkable autumn afternoon in Westfield, Indiana. Tate Vaughn, my husband of 18 years, 41 going on 12, stood in our impeccably decorated living room, a room, I might add, that I'd spent countless hours curating, only for him to treat it like a glorified sports bar, and delivered his bombshell. He said it with the same detached air he used to discuss the latest NFL draft picks. I just stood there, a slow, almost theatrical smile spreading across my face, and then, with the practiced grace of a seasoned performer, I handed him a plain manila envelope, the kind you use for tax documents, or perhaps in this case for delivering a perfectly chilled, perfectly devastating dose of reality. He looked at it, then at me, a flicker of confusion in his eyes, as if I'd just handed him a receipt for my new mistress. If I had known "till death do us part" actually meant being replaced by a Starbucks barista who couldn't even spell her own name correctly on a venti cup, seriously, Crispy instead of Christy, I would have invested heavily in therapy, and more importantly, in a chain of coffee shops just to spite her. Welcome to Westfield, Indiana, a suburb so picture-perfect it practically bleeds beige. Here, the lawns are always mowed, the SUVs are always spotless, and the gossip flows faster than the pumpkin spice lattes at the local Starbucks. I'm Ellis Ramsey, 39, a high school English teacher by profession, a connoisseur of classic literature, and, more recently, a reluctant expert in the dark arts of marital sabotage. My superpower? Sarcasm, delivered with the precision of a surgeon and the bite of a pit bull. I'd spent the last 2 decades navigating the treacherous waters of suburban domesticity, raising 2 children, Piper, 16, a TikTok sensation whose primary form of communication was a series of eye rolls, and Camden, 12, a future corporate shark in training, whose manipulative genius was already terrifyingly evident. Our family life, I often mused, was less a cohesive unit and more a perpetually derailed train, perpetually served at a chaotic Wednesday potluck. Every week, another casserole of drama, another lukewarm dish of disappointment. Tate, bless his oblivious heart, was a regional sales manager for some faceless software company. His true passion, however, was fantasy football, a pursuit to which he dedicated more emotional energy than he ever did to our marriage. He was the kind of man who could recite player stats from 1998, but couldn't remember our anniversary without a calendar alert. His announcement about Crispy moving in tomorrow barely registered as a surprise. Frankly, I was more concerned about whether she'd bring enough industrial-strength bleach to eradicate the moral stain she was about to leave on our pristine cream-colored sofa. A sofa, by the way, that cost more than Tate's entire Fantasy League entry fees combined. I imagined her, a mere 24 years old, probably still thinking avocado toast was a groundbreaking culinary achievement, waltzing into my house, expecting to inherit my life. The audacity was almost admirable, if it weren't so utterly infuriating. But the true pièce de résistance of this unfolding domestic drama wasn't Tate's casual cruelty or Crispy's impending arrival. It was the contents of that manila envelope. Tate, with a bewildered frown, finally tore it open. His eyes scanned the documents, then widened, first in disbelief, then in a dawning horror that was almost satisfying to witness. It wasn't divorce papers. Oh no. Divorce papers would have been too easy, too predictable. What he found were printouts from a highly exclusive, fiercely guarded, and utterly ruthless secret PTA group chat. And nestled among the screenshots of his increasingly desperate DMs to Crispy was the crowning jewel. A video. A video, inadvertently filmed by Chloe, a rival barista at the very same Starbucks, of Tate serenading his sweetheart at the drive-thru. His off-key warbling of some cheesy 80s power ballad, meant to be a romantic gesture, was now a permanent fixture in the neighborhood's digital archives. The sheer, unadulterated cringe factor alone was enough to make it viral. The PTA group chat, you see, is the true nerve center of Westfield. It's where reputations are made and shattered, where neighborhood gossip is distilled into potent, weaponized information. It's where the hot mess of suburban life truly thrives. And I, Ellis Ramsey, had just dropped a nuclear bomb right in the middle of it. The video, titled Westfield's Next Top Crooner, or Cringer, had been circulating for a mere 12 hours, but already the comments section was a dumpster fire of epic proportions. Is that Tate Vaughn from the HOA board? OMG, his wife is Ellis Ramsey, the English teacher. Someone spill the tea, stat! The indignation, the schadenfreude, the sheer gossip. It was glorious. My plan, meticulously crafted over weeks of simmering resentment and fueled by countless iced coffees, was simple yet devastating. I wasn't going for a quiet, dignified exit. No, that wasn't my style. I was going to transform our upcoming Thanksgiving dinner into the Super Bowl of exposed secrets, a meticulously orchestrated public humiliation. Each PowerPoint slide I envisioned would be sponsored by acidic commentary and razor-sharp inside jokes, delivered with the deadpan precision of a seasoned stand-up comedian. By the time the cranberry sauce was passed, Tate and his crispy would be the latest meme sensation in the neighborhood, their faces plastered across every suburban mom's phone, their affair a cautionary tale whispered over organic kale salads. And I, Ellis, would discover that single life was far more exhilarating with an ex-husband as a meme than with a wedding ring. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my narrative, about turning my personal train wreck into a viral masterpiece. My new fitness routine, I decided, would be carrying grudges and other people's reputations, both, surprisingly, light as a venti iced latte. The satisfaction, however, would be heavy, rich, and utterly delicious. Tate's face, usually a canvas of carefully maintained corporate blandness, contorted into a grotesque mosaic of shock, betrayal, and a healthy dose of, "Oh crap, I'm busted." He looked at the printouts, then at the video playing on his phone, a video I had sent him naturally, and then back at me, as if I'd just sprouted a second head and started reciting Shakespeare in Latin. "Ellis, what in the actual hell is this?" he sputtered, his voice cracking like a teenager's. I just arched an eyebrow, taking another slow sip of my iced coffee. "Oh, that? Just a little something I like to call Exhibit A, Your Midlife Crisis, featuring a barista who can't spell. Consider it my contribution to the Westfield gossip economy. You're welcome." His indignation was almost cute, like a toddler throwing a tantrum because his juice box was empty. You put this in the PTA chat? Are you insane? My reputation, my job." He practically shrieked, waving the phone around like a lunatic trying to swat a particularly annoying fly. I let out a low, humorless chuckle. "Your reputation, Tate? Honey, your reputation sailed south with your dignity the moment you decided to serenade Crispy at the Starbucks drive-thru. As for your job, I'm pretty sure a regional sales manager caught crooning to mistress on company time isn't exactly a bullet point on the Employee of the Month plaque." The sheer audacity of his concern for his reputation after systematically dismantling mine for months was a masterclass in male privilege. It was giving entitled suburban dad whose biggest problem is the HOA complaining about his lawn gnomes. The next few days were a blur of delicious, escalating chaos. Tate, bless his heart, tried to play damage control. He called every single person in the PTA chat, probably stammering out some pathetic excuse about misunderstandings and deeply regrettable karaoke sessions. But in Westfield, once the tea is spilled, it's spilled. And this wasn't just tea. It was a whole pot of scalding, bitter brew. My phone, usually reserved for passive-aggressive texts from Piper about needing more allowance or Camden's endless requests for V-Bucks, was now a buzzing hub of solidarity and morbid curiosity. "Ellis girl, you are a legend," read one text from Brenda, a fellow soccer mom whose husband had once tried to flirt with me at a block party. "He totally deserved it. What's next?" Another from Sarah, who ran the local book club, chimed in. The support was overwhelming, and honestly, a little surprising. Turns out there were a lot of women in Westfield who had their own Tate Vaughns, just waiting for someone to light the fuse. The microaggressions, which had been a constant hum in my life, suddenly amplified. At the grocery store, I'd catch women giving me sympathetic glances, or worse, pitying glances, as if I were a particularly sad stray puppy. But then a quick wink, a subtle nod, and I knew they were on my side. Tate, on the other hand, became a pariah. At the country club, where we'd spent countless weekends pretending to enjoy golf and forced small talk, he was suddenly invisible. Men he'd golfed with for years would suddenly find urgent reasons to check their phones or tie their shoes when he approached. Women would turn their backs, their hushed conversations punctuated by the occasional pointed giggle. It was a beautiful thing to watch, like a slow-motion car crash, but instead of mangled metal, it was Tate's ego being systematically flattened. One afternoon, I was at Target, doing my weekly retail therapy, when I spotted Crispy, or rather, Brittany, as I'd learned her actual name was. She was pushing a cart overflowing with cheap home decor, clearly preparing for her grand entrance into Tate's, and by extension, my life. She was younger, yes, with that fresh-faced innocence that screams, "I still think life is a rom-com." She saw me, and her eyes, wide and startled, darted away. I, however, am not one to shy away from a good confrontation, especially when I have the moral high ground and a cart full of organic kale. I strolled up to her, a saccharine smile plastered on my face. "Brittany, right? Or is it Crispy today? Just making sure I get it right for the Thanksgiving dinner invitation." Her face went from pale to beet red in about 0.5 seconds. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, clutching a throw pillow emblazoned with a cheesy "Live, Laugh, Love" slogan. I just chuckled. "Oh, honey, you will. You absolutely will. Just make sure you bring a hearty appetite, and maybe a thick skin. You're going to need it." I winked, then pushed my cart past her, leaving her standing amidst the home goods aisle, looking like a hot mess who'd just seen a ghost. The satisfaction was palpable, a delicious warmth spreading through me like a perfectly brewed espresso. The kids, predictably, were a mixed bag. Piper, ever the pragmatist, was mostly concerned about how this would affect her social standing and her ability to get a ride to soccer practice. "Mom, is Dad really moving Brittany into our house? That's like totally cringe. What are people going to say at school?" she whined, as if I was the one who had orchestrated this entire train wreck. Camden, on the other hand, saw an opportunity. "So, if Dad's moving out, does that mean I get his gaming console, and maybe a bigger allowance for keeping quiet about all this?" he asked, his eyes gleaming with entrepreneurial cunning. I had to admit, the kid had a point. I just sighed. "We'll see, sweetie. We'll see. But for now, let's just say Dad's about to learn a very expensive lesson in don't mess with an English teacher." The tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a butter knife. Tate tried to avoid me, skulking around like a guilty teenager, but I made sure he couldn't escape. Every morning I'd leave printouts of new comments from the PTA chat on his breakfast plate. "Did you see what Carol from the book club said about your singing voice, Tate? Ouch." Or, "Looks like Brenda thinks you're a dumpster fire. Harsh, but fair." He'd just glare, then stomp off, probably to call his lawyer, who, I was sure, was already on my speed dial. The anger, the humiliation, the sheer absurdity of it all. It was a potent cocktail, and I was savoring every drop. But this was just the appetizer. The main course, the grand finale, was still to come, and it was going to be epic. Watching Tate squirm was, I admit, a guilty pleasure. It was like watching a particularly clumsy squirrel try to hide a nut in a concrete wall, frantic, futile, and utterly predictable. The Westfield rumor mill was churning faster than a Starbucks blender during rush hour, and Tate was the main ingredient in everyone's spill the tea session. He'd even stopped going to the country club, opting instead for pathetic solo rounds at the public course, probably hoping the anonymity would shield him from the judgmental stares. Spoiler alert, it didn't. In the suburbs, anonymity is a myth, especially when you're the star of the latest scandal. But even as I reveled in his public humiliation, a nagging feeling persisted. This wasn't enough. It was satisfying, yes, like a perfectly executed mic drop, but it lacked the permanence I craved. This was merely a temporary discomfort for Tate, a minor inconvenience before he moved on to his next unsuspecting victim, probably with Brittany on his arm, blissfully unaware that she was just the latest flavor of the month. My inner English teacher, the one who demanded a proper resolution to every narrative, knew there was a deeper plot twist waiting to be uncovered. And boy, was I right. The crucial discovery came, as most life-altering revelations do, in the most mundane of settings, while I was organizing our joint tax documents for my lawyer, Gwendolyn Sterling. Gwen was a force of nature, a no-nonsense divorce attorney with a platinum bob and a stare that could melt steel. She was the kind of woman who wore power suits to brunch and probably negotiated her coffee order. "Ellis, darling," she'd said during our first meeting, "Tate Vaughn is a textbook case. Predictable, pompous, and probably hiding something. They always are." Her words echoed in my mind as I sifted through a stack of papers that smelled faintly of Tate's cheap cologne and desperation. It was a small, almost insignificant detail on a Schedule K-1 form from 2 years ago. A partnership distribution from a company I'd never heard of. Vaughn & Sons Holdings, LLC. Sons. Tate didn't have any sons, just Camden, who was more interested in Fortnite than corporate acquisitions. I remembered Tate mentioning a small investment with his brother-in-law, Mark, Brittany's older brother, a man whose primary contribution to society seemed to be perfecting the art of the dad bod and complaining about traffic. I'd dismissed it as another one of Tate's half-baked schemes, something to brag about at Super Bowl parties. But the numbers on this K-1 form weren't small. They were significant, and they weren't listed on any of our joint financial statements. Not a single penny. My heart did a little skip and a half, not from fear, but from a sudden, exhilarating rush of adrenaline. This wasn't just about a hidden investment. This was about a deliberate, calculated attempt to siphon off marital assets, to hide money from me during the divorce proceedings. It was the financial equivalent of a ghosting, disappearing with assets while I was left holding the bag. The audacity, the sheer, unmitigated gall. It was giving suburban white guy thinks he's smarter than everyone else. I immediately called Gwen. "Gwen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I think Tate just tried to pull a fast one, and I found his Achilles heel." Gwen, bless her cynical heart, was practically purring over the phone. "I knew it! They always do. What have you got, Ellis?" I explained the K-1, the Vaughn & Sons Holdings LLC, the connection to Mark. Gwen's legal brain went into overdrive. She explained that if Tate had been using marital funds to invest in this company, and then intentionally omitted it from his financial disclosures, it was a serious breach. Not just a slap on the wrist kind of serious, but a "you're going to regret ever meeting me" kind of serious. "This, Ellis," she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction, "is where we turn the screws. Hard." The next few weeks became my personal masterclass in how to dismantle your ex-husband's life, legally and hilariously. My English teacher brain, usually occupied with analyzing Shakespearean sonnets and correcting dangling participles, was now fully engaged in forensic accounting and legal strategy. I felt like a suburban Sherlock Holmes, piecing together clues from bank statements, property records, and even a few strategically placed accidental conversations with unsuspecting neighbors. Turns out Mark had recently bought a rather swanky boat, a fishing vessel, he called it, but it looked more like a floating party palace. Coincidence? In Tate's world, there are no coincidences, only poorly executed cover-ups. My preparation was meticulous, almost surgical. I spent hours poring over documents, cross-referencing dates, and highlighting discrepancies. I even learned a few things about corporate structures and asset protection, knowledge I never thought I'd need outside of a particularly boring episode of Shark Tank. I enlisted the help of Marcus Hayes, a financial advisor friend who had a knack for sniffing out shady dealings. Marcus, a man who believed that a good spreadsheet could solve almost any problem, was delighted. "Ellis, this is better than any true crime podcast," he'd chuckled, his eyes gleaming behind his glasses as he dissected Tate's convoluted financial trail. "He's not just hiding money, he's practically broadcasting it to anyone who knows how to read a balance sheet." The humor in all this was the sheer irony of Tate, a man who prided himself on his business acumen, being so utterly incompetent at deception. He thought he was playing chess, but he was barely playing checkers, and I was about to flip the board over. I imagined his face when Gwen presented our findings, that same grotesque mosaic of shock and betrayal, but this time with a healthy dose of, oh crap, I'm financially ruined. It was a delicious thought, a mental wine o'clock moment that kept me going through the late nights of research. I started dropping subtle hints to Piper and Camden, framing it as Mommy's little project. Piper, with her teenage cynicism, just rolled her eyes. Are you like becoming a detective, Mom? That's so extra. Camden, however, was intrigued. So, if you find more money, does that mean I get a new gaming console and a bigger allowance? He asked, ever the pragmatist. I just winked. Let's just say, sweetie, Mommy is ensuring our future is financially secure. And maybe, just maybe, your dad is about to learn that you don't underestimate an English teacher with a grudge and a good lawyer. The plan was coming together like a perfectly crafted essay, with a clear thesis, supporting arguments, and a devastating conclusion. Tate thought he had me cornered, a hot mess of a woman he could easily discard. He thought I was just another suburban wife, too naive or too emotionally distraught to fight back effectively. But he forgot one crucial detail. I'm an expert in narrative. And every good narrative needs a protagonist who rises from the ashes, a villain who gets his just desserts, and a plot twist that leaves everyone gasping. He was about to find out that my revenge wasn't just about public embarrassment. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine, and then some. And the best part? It was all perfectly legal. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place when Gwen confirmed that Vaughn & Sons Holdings LLC had recently acquired a significant stake in a local commercial property, a prime piece of real estate downtown that Tate had always coveted. He was using marital funds to build his secret empire, right under my nose, planning to unveil it post-divorce as his new beginning with Brittany. Oh, honey, no. That property, that empire, was about to become our new beginning. And Tate was about to learn that karma isn't just a concept. It's a meticulously calculated legal strategy. You know that moment in a movie when the hero, after being dragged through the mud, finally gets their mic drop moment? That was me, walking into the final mediation session. Tate, looking like a particularly deflated balloon animal, was already there, fidgeting in his expensive suit. Brittany, perched beside him like a brightly colored, slightly less intelligent parrot, was attempting to project an air of serene superiority, but her eyes darted around the room like she was expecting a pop quiz on marital law. Gwen, my legal eagle, was already at the table, radiating the calm, predatory energy of a shark who just smelled blood in the water. I, on the other hand, felt like I'd just chugged a triple espresso and was ready to win a marathon. A marathon of legal humiliation. Good morning, Mr. Vaughn, Ms. Hayes, Gwen began, her voice smooth as bourbon. And Ellis, shall we get started? Tate, ever the drama queen, cleared his throat. I believe we've submitted all necessary financial disclosures, Gwendolyn. I'm ready to finalize this unfortunate chapter. He shot me a look that was supposed to be pitying but landed somewhere between constipated and condescending. Oh, honey, you have no idea what unfortunate is about to look like. Gwen merely smiled, a subtle, almost imperceptible curve of her lips that I knew meant she was about to unleash hell. Indeed, Mr. Vaughn, and we appreciate your thoroughness. However, we've uncovered a few discrepancies, specifically regarding an entity called Vaughn & Sons Holdings LLC. The air in the room instantly thickened. Tate froze, his face draining of color faster than a cheap tie in the washing machine. Brittany, bless her heart, actually gasped. It was a perfectly timed, dramatic gasp, like she'd just witnessed a car crash. Which, in a way, she had. Tate's carefully constructed financial facade was about to become a dumpster fire of epic proportions. Vaughn & Sons? Tate stammered, trying to regain his composure. That's a small private investment with my brother-in-law, Mark. Nothing substantial. It's not relevant to our marital assets. He attempted a dismissive wave of his hand, but it looked more like he was swatting a phantom fly. Gwen, however, wasn't having it. She pulled out a stack of impeccably organized documents, each tabbed and highlighted. On the contrary, Mr. Vaughn, our forensic accountant, Mr. Hayes, has meticulously traced the initial capital for Vaughn and Sons Holdings, LLC, directly back to your joint savings account approximately 2 years ago, funds that were, at the time, undeniably marital assets. And subsequently, we have evidence that this small private investment has acquired a significant commercial property downtown, valued at nearly $5 million, which you conveniently failed to disclose in any of your financial statements. Boom. The sound wasn't audible, but I could practically hear the air being sucked out of Tate's lungs. His jaw went slack, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and utter terror. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, except the headlights were a freight train of legal consequences. Brittany, beside him, was now a shade of pale green, her perfectly coiffed hair suddenly looking a little less perfect. She probably hadn't signed up for financially implicated in a divorce fraud when she started dating Tate. This is outrageous, Tate finally managed, his voice cracking. Mark and we were going to use that property to start a new venture after the divorce. It wasn't meant to be hidden. Gwen raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Intention is one thing, Mr. Vaughn. Action is another. You deliberately omitted this asset from your disclosures. That, in legal terms, is called fraudulent concealment of assets, and in the state of California, that can lead to significant penalties, including the forfeiture of the hidden asset entirely to the injured party. In this case, Ellis. My heart did a little victory dance. Forfeiture. That's legal speak for, you tried to screw me over, and now I get everything you tried to hide, plus bragging rights. It was poetic justice, served on a silver platter, with a side of Tate's tears. And the best part? It was all perfectly legal, perfectly above board. No messy drama, just cold, hard facts and the law. Tate started to sputter, his face turning a mottled red. You can't. That's not fair. That's my future, my investment. Your investment made with marital funds, Mr. Vaughn, Gwen calmly corrected him. Funds that Ellis contributed to, both directly and indirectly, throughout your 20-year marriage, and your attempt to hide it demonstrates a clear intent to defraud. The court tends to look very unfavorably on that. The mediator, a stoic woman named Ms. Jenkins, cleared her throat. Mr. Vaughn, Ms. Sterling's points are well taken. Given the evidence presented, it appears you have indeed failed to disclose a significant marital asset. This puts you in a very precarious legal position. Tate was a hot mess. He started sweating, his suit jacket suddenly looking too tight. He turned to Brittany, probably hoping for some moral support, but she was busy staring at her perfectly manicured nails, clearly trying to distance herself from the unfolding disaster. It was a classic, every man for himself moment, a true suburban train wreck playing out in real time. So, Gwen continued, pressing her advantage, our proposal is simple. Ellis receives 100% of the equity in Vaughn & Sons Holdings, LLC, including the downtown commercial property. In addition, given your egregious misconduct, we are seeking an additional sum for emotional distress and punitive damages, as well as full reimbursement for all legal and accounting fees incurred. Tate looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. 100%? You're joking. That's everything. And punitive damages? For what? For attempting to financially ruin your wife of 2 decades, Mr. Vaughn, I interjected, my voice calm but firm. For making me feel like I was invisible, for gaslighting me, and for thinking you could just walk away with half our life savings and start a new life with her. I gestured vaguely towards Brittany, who flinched as if I'd thrown a dart at her. Consider it a tuition fee for the Don't Underestimate a Woman's Intuition School of Hard Knocks. The mediator scribbled furiously. Tate's lawyer, a nervous-looking man named Mr. Peterson, started whispering urgently in his ear. I could almost hear him saying, "Take the deal, Tate. You're toast." The negotiation was short and brutal. Tate, realizing he was cornered, eventually caved. He had no choice. The legal ramifications of fighting this were far worse than simply giving up the hidden assets. He'd not only lose the property, but face a public scandal that would make his country club exile look like a mild inconvenience. His reputation, already bruised, would be utterly shattered. His career, built on trust and financial savvy, would be irrevocably damaged. It was the ultimate cancel culture for a suburban businessman. The final agreement was signed, sealed, and delivered. The downtown commercial property, Tate's secret empire, was now mine. All mine. And the punitive damages meant I wouldn't just be comfortable, I'd be financially independent, free to pursue whatever I wanted. No more relying on Tate's generosity, no more feeling like a kept woman. I was a self-made woman thanks to Tate's idiocy. As we walked out, I couldn't resist a final jab. "You know, Tate," I said, turning to him, "I always told you that details matter. Apparently you skipped that lesson." He just glared, defeated. Brittany, however, had a new look in her eyes, a flicker of fear, a dawning realization that her sugar daddy had just been exposed as a financial fraudster. I imagined their car ride home, silent and tense, punctuated only by the sound of her internal calculator reassessing her life choices. It was a beautiful symphony of schadenfreude. The new normal was glorious. The downtown property, a beautiful old building with exposed brick and high ceilings, was a gold mine. I decided to convert it into a creative hub, a co-working space for artists and writers, with a small coffee shop and a bookstore. It was everything I loved, a place where stories could flourish, unlike the one Tate tried to write for me. I even hired Marcus, my financial advisor friend, to manage the business side. He was thrilled. "Ellis, you turned his financial misstep into your golden ticket. That's what I call a power move." Tate, meanwhile, became a pariah. His golf buddies mysteriously stopped returning his calls. His membership at the country club was under review. He and Brittany eventually broke up. Apparently, her taste for expensive handbags didn't quite align with his newly diminished financial prospects. She moved back in with her parents, probably still wondering how she ended up being collateral damage in a suburban divorce. Some people just don't learn that karma's a bitch, and she always sends an itemized bill. My kids, Piper and Camden, were surprisingly proud. Piper, after initially rolling her eyes, admitted, "Okay, Mom, you kinda slayed. That was epic." Camden, ever practical, was just happy about the increased allowance and the new gaming console. "See, Mom? I told you it would pay off." It wasn't just about the money or the property. It was about reclaiming my narrative. Tate thought he was the protagonist, the charming businessman who could sweep problems under the rug. But he was just a supporting character in my story, and his role was to be the catalyst for my epic comeback. And boy, did he deliver. The dust had settled, the legal papers were signed, and the scent of victory, surprisingly, smelled a lot like fresh coffee and old books. My new downtown venture, the Storyteller's Nook, was thriving. It was a co-working space, a coffee shop, and a small independent bookstore all rolled into one. A place where people could write their own stories, literally and figuratively. It was a far cry from the beige, soul-crushing walls of my suburban McMansion, and every brick, every beam, felt like a monument to my newfound freedom. Tate's attempt to build a secret empire had, quite ironically, handed me the keys to my own. Talk about a plot twist nobody saw coming. Especially not him. Life after Tate was less about moving on and more about moving up, with a healthy dose of "I told you so" sprinkled in. I was no longer Ellis Vaughn, the invisible suburban wife, but Ellis Kennedy, the woman who turned her ex-husband's treachery into a thriving business and a cautionary tale for men who thought they could get away with anything. My name, once a whisper in the shadow of Tate's ego, now carried a certain weight in Westfield, a suburban legend, if you will. I even started a small, informal, women's empowerment through financial literacy group at the Storyteller's Nook, mostly because I enjoyed watching women realize their own power, and partly because it was another subtle jab at Tate's legacy of financial deceit. Karma, it turns out, isn't just a concept. It's a full-time job, and I was getting pretty good at it. Tate? Oh, Tate. His downfall was as spectacular as it was predictable. The country club, once his sanctuary, became his personal purgatory. His membership was revoked, not just under review. Apparently, fraudulent concealment of assets doesn't look great on a country club resume. His business partners, sensing the shift in the wind, began to distance themselves faster than teenagers from their embarrassing parents. His new venture with Mark, which was supposed to be his phoenix rising from the ashes of our marriage, simply evaporated. Mark, it turned out, wasn't too keen on being associated with a man who had a reputation for financial shadiness. Tate ended up taking a sales job at a mid-tier real estate firm, a far cry from his former glory. And I heard he was constantly complaining about the lack of vision and mediocre coffee. Poetic justice indeed. He'd traded his penthouse view for a cubicle farm, and his bespoke suits for off-the-rack polyester. And Brittany? Last I heard, she was back living with her parents in a less-than-glamorous part of town, working as a part-time barista. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd traded a potential life of luxury for a life of latte art, all because she hitched her wagon to the wrong, deceitful star. I imagine she still scrolls through my social media, seething, wondering how the hot mess she dismissed ended up owning a prime piece of downtown real estate. Some lessons, it seems, you have to learn the hard way, preferably with a side of instant karma. My kids, bless their cynical hearts, adjusted surprisingly well. Piper, now a high school senior, was actually proud. "Mom, you literally built an empire out of Dad's stupidity," she'd said, shaking her head in admiration. "That's like peak boss energy." Camden, ever the pragmatist, was just happy that his allowance had seen a significant bump, and he now had the latest gaming console. He even occasionally helped out at the Storyteller's Nook, mostly for the free snacks and the Wi-Fi. But I saw a flicker of pride in his eyes when he talked about Mom's business. They saw me not as a victim, but as a victor. And that, more than any financial gain, was the real prize. The biggest lesson I learned? Never underestimate a woman who's been underestimated her entire life, especially one who spent 20 years perfecting the art of passive-aggressive commentary and silently observing the absurdities of suburban life. Tate thought he was writing my ending, a tragic tale of a discarded wife, but he merely provided the inciting incident for my origin story. He gave me the push I needed to realize that my worth wasn't tied to his perception or to a perfectly manicured lawn in Westfield. My worth was in my resilience, my intelligence, and my ability to turn a train wreck into a triumph. It's funny, isn't it? The very things Tate dismissed, my quiet observations, my penchant for reading, my seemingly harmless English teacher demeanor, were the tools I used to dismantle his carefully constructed lie. He saw a domestic goddess. I was a strategic general, silently planning my campaign. He saw a wife. I saw a woman biding her time. The irony is so thick you could spread it on a bagel. He wanted to erase me, but instead he carved my name into the downtown landscape. So here's my advice, delivered with the kind of acidic sincerity only a woman who's been through hell and back can muster. Don't just get mad, get even, but do it smart, do it legally, and do it with enough flair to make an entire suburb talk for years. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't a dish best served cold. It's a thriving business, a newfound independence, and a smug satisfaction that your ex-husband funded your entire glow-up. My life isn't a fairy tale, nor is it a tragedy. It's a darkly comedic masterpiece, written by me, for me. And the moral of the story? Some men learn the hard way that a woman's intuition is a hell of a lot more powerful than their ego, and karma always sends an itemized bill with interest.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.